Content warning. This video discusses a tragic criminal case involving the loss of innocent lives. All information is presented in an educational context with respect to the victims and their families. Educational purpose. This documentary explores the breakthrough in forensic genealogy that solved one of Sweden's most investigated cold cases after 16 years. October 19, 2004. Linköping, Sweden. It's a Tuesday. Crisp autumn air hangs over a city known for its university, its cathedral, and its quiet, cobblestone streets. It's a place where things like this just don't happen. In the Sjölund district, 8-year-old Mohammed Amoyuri zips up his jacket. School is out. He says goodbye to his friends and begins the short walk home, a journey he's made 100 times before. His mind is likely on afternoon cartoons, or what his mom has made for a snack. He is just a little boy, 10 minutes from the safety of his front door. Not far away, in a small wooded area near the city center, 56-year-old Anna-Lena Svensson is taking her routine morning walk. She's a language teacher, a beloved figure in the community. The path is familiar, the day is bright. It's the picture of peaceful, ordinary life. But on this day, in this quiet city, an unseen darkness is about to converge on these two innocent paths. A shadow is stalking the sunlit streets of Linköping. Within minutes of each other, in broad daylight, both Mohammed and Anna-Lena would be brutally attacked. Their lives stolen in a burst of senseless violence that would leave no clues, no motive, and no suspect. The crime would launch one of the largest and most expensive police investigations in Swedish history. It would terrorize a nation and leave two families trapped in a nightmare of unanswered questions. For 16 long years, a ghost haunted Sweden. A killer with a name, a face, but no identity. The case went cold, a national wound that refused to heal. For 16 years, Sweden demanded answers. Then, a revolutionary new science did the impossible. Welcome to Vanished Voices. Today, we're dissecting Sweden's darkest day and the incredible DNA breakthrough that finally caught a killer hiding in plain sight. To follow our deep dives into the cases the world forgot, make sure you subscribe to Vanished Voices and click that notification bell. You won't want to miss what's coming. To understand the 16-year hunt for justice, you first have to understand the horror of that autumn day. You have to walk the final steps with the victims. Mohammed Amoyuri was a bright, happy second grader. His family had moved to Sweden from Lebanon, seeking a safer, more peaceful life. On October 19th, his day was completely normal. He finished his classes at the Sjölund school. At around 7:50 a.m., he left for home. It was a walk of less than a kilometer. He walked past apartment buildings, along a familiar footpath. He was almost home. He was just moments away from walking through his front door when a man, seemingly from nowhere, appeared. The attack was sudden, ferocious, and utterly inexplicable. Mohammed didn't stand a chance. At the exact same time, Anna-Lena Svensson was enjoying the brisk morning air. She was a respected teacher, a sister, a friend. Her walk through a small patch of woodland near her home was part of her daily ritual. It was a moment of peace before her day truly began. Her path was also about to be crossed by that same man. Why he was there, and why he chose her, are questions that would torment investigators for years. Like with Mohammed, the attack was brutal and without warning. Two separate lives, unconnected in any way, extinguished by the same hand in the same small window of time. The first call to emergency services came in just after 8 a.m. A cyclist riding along the footpath saw a small shape on the ground. It was Mohammed. He was gravely injured, but still alive. Paramedics rushed to the scene, desperately trying to save him. Minutes later, a second, even more chilling discovery was made. Less than 30 meters away, hidden by some bushes, a passerby found the body of Anna-Lena Svensson. The connection was immediate and horrifying. This wasn't two isolated incidents. This was a double murder. The crime scene was a portrait of chaos and disbelief. Two victims, yards apart. One a child, one a middle-aged woman. The weapon, a butterfly knife, was found discarded nearby. The killer had simply vanished. Police flooded the area, creating a massive cordon. But it was too late. The attacker was gone, melting back into the fabric of the city. The news spread like a shockwave. First through Linköping, then across all of Sweden. This crime was different. It defied all logic. These weren't rival gang members or a domestic dispute that had spiraled out of control. This was the random slaughter of the most innocent members of society. A child walking home from school. A woman on her morning walk. Fear gripped Linköping. Parents refused to let their children walk to school alone. The streets felt unsafe. The media descended on the city, broadcasting the faces of Muhammad and Annalena into every home in the country. They became symbols of a nation's stolen innocence. The question on everyone's lips was the same. Who could do this? And perhaps more terrifyingly, why? There was no robbery, no apparent sexual assault, just pure, unadulterated violence. The randomness of it was the most terrifying part. It suggested the killer could be anyone, and the next victim could be anywhere. This singular act of brutality set in motion one of the most sprawling, complex, and ultimately frustrating investigations Sweden had ever seen. A 16-year marathon was about to begin, and for the families of the victims, it would be a lifetime of waiting. The police had a crime scene, they had victims, and they had a weapon. But what they didn't know was that the most important clue they had was one they couldn't even see. The investigation into the Linköping double murder was, from the very beginning, monumental. The Swedish police force threw everything they had at it. They knew the first 48 hours were critical. But 48 hours turned into a week turned into a month turned into a year. They had one priceless advantage. The killer, in his frenzied attack, had made a mistake. He left his DNA behind. A clear, viable profile was recovered from the handle of the butterfly knife, and also from a cap found near the scene that was believed to be his. This was 2004. DNA technology was well established. This should have been the key that unlocked the entire case. Investigators were confident. It was only a matter of time. They ran the profile against Sweden's national DNA database, which contained samples from convicted criminals. No match. They expanded the search, running the profile against databases across Europe through Interpol. Still no match. This was the investigators' worst-case scenario. It meant their suspect was a ghost. He had no serious criminal record. He had never been arrested or had his DNA taken for any other crime. He was, for all intents and purposes, invisible to the system. The police were forced to rely on old-fashioned detective work. They interviewed thousands of people. They chased down every lead, no matter how flimsy. They released a composite sketch of a man seen near the area, but it was vague and generated a flood of tips that led nowhere. They profiled the killer, believing him to be a young man, likely with mental health issues, living in or near the area. But that description fit thousands of people. Over the years, police would take voluntary DNA swabs from over 6,500 men in the region. Every single one came back negative. For the families of Muhammad Amoyuri and Annalena Svensson, the years that followed were an exercise in agony. Every anniversary was a painful media spectacle. Every false lead was a roller coaster of hope and despair. Muhammad's father, in heartbreaking interviews, spoke of his family's escape from war-torn Lebanon, only to have his son murdered in the perceived safety of Sweden. Annalena's family was left to wonder why this senseless act had shattered their lives. The case file grew to be one of the largest in Swedish history. It contained over 70,000 documents. The cost of the investigation soared into the tens of millions of euros. Yet, for all that effort, they were no closer to an answer than they were on day one. The Linköping double murder became Sweden's most infamous cold case. A national obsession. A wound that wouldn't close. By 2018, 14 years had passed. A new generation of detectives was now working the case. The original investigators had retired or moved on. The evidence sat in boxes, a silent testament to a decade and a half of failure. The hope of ever finding the killer was fading. But then, something happened. Not in Sweden, but 5,000 miles away, in California. News broke that police had finally caught the notorious Golden State Killer, a serial murderer and rapist who had terrorized California in the 70s and 80s. For 40 years, he had been a ghost, just like the Linköping Killer. And how did they catch him? They didn't get a database hit. They didn't get a confession. They used a revolutionary new method, forensic genealogy. This Golden State Killer technique was a true DNA breakthrough for this kind of unsolved mystery. Investigators took the killer's old crime scene DNA and, instead of putting it into a criminal database, They uploaded it to a public, open-source genealogy website, a site where ordinary people upload their own DNA results from companies like Ancestry and 23andMe to find relatives and build family trees. They didn't find the killer, but they found his third and fourth cousins. From there, genealogists built a massive family tree, working backwards to find a common ancestor, and then forwards again, tracing every branch down to the present day until they narrowed it down to just one man, Joseph James D'Angelo. It was a stunning victory for science and persistence. Across the Atlantic, the Swedish police were watching. Could this be the answer? Could this new science solve the one case that had haunted them for so long? For the first time in over a decade, there was a flicker of genuine hope. The era of traditional investigation was over. The era of genetic sleuthing was about to begin. Hit the like button if you want justice for Muhammad and Annalena, and let's see how this incredible technology finally unmasked the ghost. The breakthrough in the Golden State Killer case opened a door that Swedish investigators were desperate to walk through. But it wasn't simple. Using public genealogy databases for criminal investigations raised serious legal and ethical questions in Sweden. For 2 years, the police fought for the right to use this groundbreaking technique. Finally, in 2019, they got the green light. The task of navigating this new frontier fell to an unlikely pair. Anna Boden, a tenacious journalist who had covered the case for years, and Peter Sjölund, arguably Sweden's foremost genetic genealogist. Sjölund was given the killer's DNA profile, the same string of markers that had yielded nothing for 16 years. He uploaded it to 2 commercial DNA databases, GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA. And then, he waited. The results came back. No direct match. No brothers, no parents, no first cousins. The killer himself wasn't in the database, but his distant relatives were. Sjölund got several hits for third, fourth, and even fifth cousins. People who shared a great-great-great-grandparent with a brutal murderer and had no idea. Now, the real work began. And this is where it gets truly incredible. Think of it like this. Peter Sjölund had 2 lists of distant relatives. One list from the killer's mother's side, and another from the killer's father's side. His job was to build 2 gigantic family trees, one for each side, going back to the 1800s. He used the DNA matches as starting points and then dove into Sweden's meticulous historical records, church logs, birth certificates, census data. He was a detective whose crime scene was the past. For months, he painstakingly constructed these sprawling family trees, branch by branch, person by person. He was mapping the killer's entire ancestry without even knowing his name. He followed one tree down from a set of great-great-grandparents, and the other tree down from another. The police were looking for a needle in a haystack. Peter Sjölund was building the haystack from scratch, just so he could find the needle. Then, in the spring of 2020, came the moment that would change everything. The breakthrough. Deep within the complex web of names and dates, 2 branches, one from the paternal tree and one from the maternal tree, converged. They met at a single family, a husband and wife who had children. The killer had to be a descendant of that specific couple. The tree had led them to a small family group, and in that group were 2 brothers. Suddenly, after 16 years of searching for a ghost among millions, the police had a suspect list of just 2 people. Investigators quickly checked the 2 brothers. One was in his late 40s and had a history that didn't fit the profile. The other was named Daniel Nyqvist. He was 37 years old. He lived a quiet, reclusive life. And crucially, at the time of the murders in 2004, he had lived in Linköping. The puzzle pieces were snapping into place with breathtaking speed. On June 9, 2020, police approached Daniel Nyqvist at his home. They didn't storm the building. They simply knocked on his door and asked to talk. They explained they were taking DNA samples for the old Linköping case. Nyqvist agreed. They took a saliva swab. It was rushed to the lab. The result came back in hours. It was a perfect 1 in a billion match to the DNA found on the knife and the cap 16 years earlier. They had him. The ghost who had haunted Sweden for a generation finally had a name, Daniel Nyqvist. When confronted with the evidence, Nyqvist confessed. His motive was as chilling as it was pathetic. He claimed he had long-standing mental health issues and an obsession with violence and knives. On that October morning in 2004, he simply felt an urge to kill. He saw Muhammad first, a random, defenseless target. Then he saw Annalena. There was no connection, no reason. It was an explosion of pure, motiveless evil. The news of the arrest stunned Sweden. After so long, it seemed impossible. But the science was undeniable. In October 2020, exactly 16 years after the murders, Daniel Nyqvist was found guilty and sentenced to life in psychiatric care. For the families of Mohammed Amoyuri and Annalena Svensson, the news was overwhelming. There was relief. There was vindication. But there was no joy. Justice couldn't bring their loved ones back. But it could, finally, close a chapter of unbearable uncertainty. The wait was over. The forensics and genealogy work had solved this cold case. Sweden could finally breathe again. The conviction of Daniel Nyqvist was more than just the end of one case. It was the dawn of a new era in law enforcement for all of Europe. The Linköping double murder was the first case outside of the United States to be solved using commercial forensic genealogy. It proved that the technique that caught the Golden State Killer wasn't a fluke. It was a powerful new tool. As a direct result of this success, Sweden amended its laws to make it easier for police to use genealogy databases in serious criminal investigations. Other European nations have followed suit, studying the Linköping model as a blueprint for how to solve their own impossible cold cases. The story of this incredible DNA breakthrough has now captured the world's attention. The Netflix series, The Breakthrough, released in January 2025, continues to bring the 16-year investigation to a global audience. The series has driven massive new interest in the case, reminding everyone of the terrible tragedy and the scientific miracle that brought it to a close. But why does this case, a tragedy in a small Swedish city, still matter so much? It matters because it shows that no case is truly hopeless. It demonstrates that even when all traditional methods fail, human ingenuity and scientific progress can find a way. It's a story about the unwavering dedication of investigators who refuse to give up and the brilliance of a genealogist who could read a story hidden in DNA. Most importantly, this story will always be about the two people whose lives were so cruelly taken on that autumn morning. Mohammed Amoyuri, an 8-year-old boy with a bright smile, who should have been allowed to grow up, and Annalena Svensson, a 56-year-old woman, a teacher and a friend, who was simply enjoying a walk on a beautiful day. Their names are no longer just attached to an unsolved mystery. They are now attached to a story of justice, a story of how science and determination finally cornered a killer after 16 years in the dark. The shadow over Linköping has finally lifted. This is Vanished Voices, where we uncover the truth the world forgot. If you believe in the power of science to deliver justice, subscribe to our channel for a new case every week. Turn on your notifications so you never miss a story. Justice may be delayed, but as the families of Mohammed and Annalena now know, it is never truly denied.